So terrific. We have quite a nice event stored up here. Thank you, Abrima Parsons and the New School for hosting Phaidon in the new museum tonight. The new museum is currently closed, and we will reopen later this year with an expanded building. And in the meantime, it's just truly special to be here at this address tonight as our temporary home. In 1977, our founding director, Marcia Tucker, moved next door where the new museum had its exhibition space at 65 Fifth Avenue. So An Evening with Mischief is a sophisticated title for what I hope will be a fun, weird, juicy conversation between New Museum's artistic director, Massimiliano, and Lukas and Kevin, Mischief's chief creative officers and co-founders. Massimiliano is the longtime artistic director of the museum and has organized often the first surveys of artists who are now renowned. So I chose some of my favorites like Camille Unruh, Chris O'Feely, Pipolati Riss, Peter Saul, Wengeshi Mutu, Faith Ringgold, and most recently, Judy Chicago. In 2013, he was the 55th Venice Biennale commissioner, and his exhibition, The Encyclopedic Palace, is roundly considered one of the best biennales ever, full stop. And I am so psyched for the new museum's inaugural exhibition, New Humans, coming this fall. I met Kevin and Lukas in 2014 on the Brown campus, where I was invited by a student group to talk about the museum's initiatives, Idea City, and the cultural incubator we had just started, New Inc. After the lecture, these two scrawny seniors rolled up and said they wanted to apply. I thought that's a bit audacious, but I gave them my email, and they did. In their interview to become a member, they proposed a continuation of the quasi-ad agency Hello Velocity that they started in college. And their goal at New Inc. was to figure out how the studio could just have one client, themselves. So Kevin and Lukas were part of the second-year cohort. We stayed in touch sporadically until the summer of 2023 when they approached me to help out on a possible book project. Well, it's come full circle that in a decade we met, we laughed, I mentored, and then they hired me for a book gig that's pretty plummy. Kevin and Lukas never stop surprising, confusing me with your ambitious, crazy, and provocative ideas. This is the book. And please now, let's give a warm welcome to our moderator, Massimiliano, and Kevin and Lukas from MIT.
Thank you, Karen, for the very nice and generous introduction. And thank you also for introducing me to Mischief and to Lukas and Kevin. We are here tonight to learn more about their work and Mischief's operation. We have, I believe, 86 slides to go through, so it's going to be quite a cavalcade. But I don't know about you, my very first question to Lukas and Kevin is very simple, and it is, what is Mischief?
Let's see, a good question. Also, I just want to say thank you to Karen for, that was very, very nice intro. What is Mischief? Mischief is a collective of us making a bunch of work. I think it's very hard to define cleanly, and I think we've sort of ended up in between business and art collective mostly. And I think even depending on who you ask within the Mischief group, you might have very different answers.
I don't want to sound like the IRS, but how many people are in Mischief at the moment?
Let's see, I think about 25 at the moment. Yeah.
And are you an LLC? Are you a company?
We are a company. Yeah.
And I hear you have a CEO?
We do. So Mischief has more co-founders than just Lukas and I. Stephen, who's here tonight, is one of them, and as well as Gabe.
Spontaneous applause.
Wow. I think maybe sort of to just give a little bit of background, because I have no idea what level of familiarity anyone has. Mischief, structurally at least, formed in late 2019 around the premise that we were going to release some kind of work every 2 weeks, and come hell or high water, we would make things and put them out into the world. And we wanted them to only be things that we wanted to make, and we wanted to try to construct something that was an entity that would let us make, eventually, anything that we wanted to make. And I think that kind of Mischief as a vehicle for maximizing the creative output of its members is the core organizing principle. It is absolutely a company, and it's sort of a deliberate choice made at that time as a working platform to let us continue to pursue larger and more ambitious projects.
You have mentioned also in the book, which is great also, it's really an amazing dissection of your projects, your adventures, and I strongly recommend it. You mentioned that you started out with this idea of having a drop every 2 weeks. Are you still operating according to that principle, or how often now do you put, and do you call them product or projects? Or,
Yeah, I mean, we started out with that cadence, and I think even for the first 3 years, averaged maybe a project every 10 days almost.
Did it require special medications?
It was definitely a grind, but I think it did a lot of really good things for us. One of the things that it did for us was it let us constantly not force projects out. We couldn't be too precious. We had to put something out. And I think that let us experiment quite a bit. I think at this point in time, Mischief is sort of, we're shifting and trying to do more large scale pieces. But I think at the beginning it helped us define the genre of project and product, especially because we were making work that was so medium, non-standardized. Like when we started, one of the things that we said was we'd only make one type of any object. So initially it was, if we made a painting, we'd make one painting. If we made a shoe, we'd make one shoe. If we made a book, we'd make one book, and that was going to be it. But that doesn't necessarily build a sustainable business that can keep all of us focused on these pieces. And it's also it's quite difficult to always jump into a new category, and you have to learn everything, and then you have to completely forget everything else when you jump in and try to do something else.
Was the goal of, I mean, first of all, you chose the word drop, which is obviously loaded. Was the goal of each drop to sell the product, or was there a principle? What was the...
Sure. I mean, okay, so we chose the word drop at a particular moment in time, right? Where that was a sort of cultural form du jour. But it also did a lot of heavy lifting for us at that time. It established the idea that it was going to be on a regular cadence, and it was going to be frequent, and it was going to be non-repeated, all of which were things that we intended to do, so it was very handy. I think something honestly that we established sort of in the intro to this book is Mischief often develops a set of rules and restrictions for itself, and they are generative and useful for sometimes many years. And then gradually we've sort of had to teach ourselves when the time is to discard those. So I think as we have come into now our 5th and beyond year of existence, the idea of a drop is perhaps something that we are moving away from. Mm-hmm. But at the time we liked the sort of like the structural connotation of it, and we were trying to expand the definition of what that drop could be, because many of these things were digital, many of them were games or interactive pieces that had no product component or had no sales component, and others were product. And in all of them, we were trying to pick the working form that would be appropriate for whatever that concept was.
I want to read actually some of the rules that you established in 2019. I hope I'm not misquoting them, but spread across categories. I don't know if this is a self-description, capitalism's hopeful monsters, which is pretty nice. The ends justify the means. Mischief makes work that exists in the system it is trying to critique. Make it shitty, aesthetic populism, practice chaos magic. Nothing is sacred. Real and fake are made in the same factory. Make cultural ready-mades. Exploit existing infrastructure and let the crowd play it. Do you still abide by these principles, you think? Or?
Most of those are pretty solid.
Yeah.
And what was the first drop?
Oh
Let's
boy.
see. Oh, yeah.
So technically, as broadcast, the first drop was a piece called The Persistence of Chaos, which was a laptop loaded with 8 pieces of malware with sort of historic significance that had collectively caused, I don't know off the top of my head, but $8 billion worth of damage while they were in the wild. So it was this like weird little software bomb that we had to keep rigorously quarantined from internet.
Did anybody acquire it, or was it for sale? Or?
It was offered at auction, and it was sold. Now, the secret is that the first like handful of mischief drops didn't actually come out on a 2-week cadence because we thought it's not cool to start from 0 projects in your pipeline. Like you want to start with at least 3 or 4 in there. So there's a little bit of date fudging in the first handful of releases before we got onto our cycle.
And did he become self-sustainable as a business when?
Let's see. I mean, I feel like we kind of, ran into it with Jesus Shoes, which was our 7th.
Oh, that was
project.
when you.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to kind of start talking about the narrative of how we got going, maybe we'll run
Absolutely,
through Jesus Shoes, because it is the first physical product that Mischief ever made and released, and it accidentally kind of gave us a business model for a minute.
And so to also contextualize it, what year was it?
2019.
2019, so same year as the beginning of.
Right.
Yeah,
In fact, this is the 7th drop. This is like whenever this is, October.
Yeah.
So, all right. Jesus Shoes were Air Max 97s with holy water injected into the air bubble sole of the shoe, so that every step that you take, you are walking on water, much like Jesus. And these are off-the-shelf Nike shoes that we purchased and modified and thought we were going to make 12 of, 1 for each apostle, and pictured very much as these kind of speculative design objects.
We didn't think anybody was going to buy them. Almost, they were priced at sort of art world or art object prices. I think we priced them at $1,425 because the Bible verse Matthew 14:25 is the verse that says Jesus walked on water, and to be honest, did not think anybody would take them seriously. And to our surprise, this sneaker world, which is not where we were coming from at all with this project. In some ways, we were almost trying to make fun of the space. Really embraced it, and they sold out very, very quickly.
And where did the drop happen? On your own? Was it
happened on a
physical manifestation? Like you had a pop-up shop, or it was just online?
It happened on we had a website for it, but it was also weirdly driven. There are all these, secondary markets. I think it popped up on StockX before it actually released on our website, and there people were bidding quite aggressively for it at the start.
I don't remember who of the two of you in the interview speaks about being in art school and realizing how little conversation there was around distribution.
Mm-hmm.
No, there is a lot, and I'm sure there are plenty of our students here tonight.
Yeah.
A lot of the conversation seems to be around ideas, around the making, around the crafting and so on, but very little around the distribution. Alighiero Boetti, who is a great Italian artist from the 60s, he said, anybody, I don't think it's true, but he says anybody can make Coca-Cola. The problem is, to distribute it. And he was, as much as Warhol, he's often described as the Italian and the Warhol or the European. He was very fascinated by networks of distribution. So I'm curious if how you develop this notion that somewhat the object and the network of distribution are one nexus of the other, and if that still remains as one of your preoccupations.
I mean, I think it was a very important thing that we realized in school. I mean, in school, Karen sort of talked about, we had a group called Hello Velocity, and I think we really noticed that we would make work together, and we'd put it in a gallery space, and it would sit there, and it wouldn't necessarily go beyond the other 20 students in the space and maybe just our friend network outside. So I think we kind of sat down and said, let's start making things with the explicit intention to have them spread in the world and hopefully natively in the environments that they were supposed to live. So for example, this is, in our mind, an art object, the Jesus shoe, but it existed in a sneaker space.
Right. So I mean, when I'm talking about it as a speculative design object, I mean, we were very heavily influenced by the work of Anthony Dunn and Fiona Raby and sort of the whole practice of speculative and critical design. Which was all about the idea that the form of a product, of a consumer good, is this incredibly useful hook to draw people in, to then begin sort of like discussing a concept or conveying some kind of critical message. You know, they're very well known for this pillow that's shaped like an atomic bomb cloud, and the idea was you could hug this thing, you know, you could have your kid cuddle up to it, and it would get them comfortable with living in a post-nuclear society. With the looming threat of world destruction. But they never ever sold it. They never distribute it. It lives in museums, and we had the chance to talk with them about it recently. I believe they made 20 of them.
And they said they still have a few.
And they have a few, yeah. So there's fewer than 20 of these things circulating in the world, and they're basically in white box environments. But the strength of a consumer product as a vehicle is that it can go to people. It can be, you know, actually acquired. It can sort of like travel and.
Do you know who acquired this first round? Was it Was it more sneakerheads or whatever they're called?
I think to start, yes, but I think it was also just such a bizarre object for a lot of them. I mean, I think this was more expensive than most of what the sneakerheads were buying immediately.
Got it.
Right. So eventually, we're jumping around in the story a little bit, but
Yeah.
there was this overwhelming demand for this object. So where we had originally made 12, we suddenly felt that there was an opportunity here, and we had this convenient out that Jesus rose again 3 days later. So 3 days after we had originally put the Jesus Shoes website up and it sold out in about 5 seconds, we were able to flip it back live again and try to produce as many of these things as we could, which as we get sort of into this next image, like this is the level of production that we were operating on. This is a serviceable but just like excruciating hydraulic pump with all of these hypodermic needles to fill these shoes. So we ultimately made several hundred of these shoes.
And the shoes were just off the shelf Nike.
The shoes were off the shelf.
Customized.
Yeah.
Right. And we bought out all of the stores in the greater New York area.
I have to say this, there is a industry joke in the art world, which is two art critics are on the boat with Jesus, and Jesus starts walking on the water, and one art critic tells the other, "Look, I told you he can't swim." It's one of my favorites, so I inevitably couldn't avoid thinking about this. And this was followed by probably what became your first more viral or controversial project, which was the Satan shoes. No?
Right. So when
I don't know if I'm skipping too far ahead.
No, that's fine. As we
Yeah.
we can sort of wrap this narrative arc. This we did 2 years after Jesus Shoes. I think we always had in the back of our minds this idea that if you're going to do the holy version of this, you have to do the counterpart at some point because they only exist in opposition to each other. We had this excellent opportunity where we just sort of by accident ended up in conversation with Lil Nas X and his team as they were gearing up for the launch of Call Me By Your Name. And we're playing with all of this devil imagery, and we thought, well,
This is the perfect opportunity.
Right, we can
Make
make
the
the
Satan
shoe, the devil can wear it, and there's sort of like this lovely synergy to that collaboration. These, instead of having holy water in the shoe, have our blood in them, which was supposed to be goat's blood because it was like much more ritualistically appropriate for Satan. But everybody that we started telling it about got really mad at us for hurting goats.
Extreme cold feet, even though we weren't going to, we were going to
Extremely
go to a
cold
butcher
feet,
shop.
Right.
Yeah.
There's goat's blood all over the place.
Yeah.
But so we had to swap it to human blood at the last minute, which makes nobody upset, apparently.
This is a vastly improved setup.
Yeah, this is great. This is a close friend who was at the time doing a master's degree at Columbia's biology school, I believe,
Yeah.
was able to get us all of these really nice metered pumps for this one.
And of these, how many did you make?
666.
Oh, of course.
Just,
And was it more expensive than Jesus?
It was less expensive.
Less expensive to make or less expensive to buy?
Less expensive to buy.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this one was $1,018 because that's the Bible verse, Luke 10:18 is where Satan falls from heaven. So,
But did you make a second run of these as well?
no, just 666.
So in the end, Jesus or Satan brought in more money?
Jesus.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, definitely Jesus.
But also this, Satan was not really on your side because what happened
All right,
was...
this time we
yeah.
got sued by Nike.
yeah.
For what, brand confusion for associating Nike with the devil.
Yeah. They didn't seem to mind the Jesus one quite as much. But
And so they tried to shut you down, or what happened?
So they issued us a lawsuit, which we only found out about because a journalist asked us for comment on it, and also issued a restraining order preventing us from selling any more of the shoes. Now, we had already sold all of the shoes, so they weren't restraining us from anything in that sense, but we needed to make sure that they were all out of our possession and on a mail truck
by the time,
before the document was physically delivered to us, basically, which meant that we scrambled everyone we knew to a warehouse in Maspeth, where we were then locked into the production floor overnight to put the finishing touches on all the shoes and box them up and put them on a truck, and then we could say that they were no longer in our possession, and we were
then could
completely
you still
restrained.
get the money and use it? Or I mean, the money had arrived. Did they threaten to take the money or to have compensation?
yeah, I mean, so we had a whole, actual legal back and forth with them, but in the end we ended up settling, and from that settlement, they agreed we did nothing wrong. We also had to agree that they did nothing wrong, despite the fact that they did kind of sue us for it.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, and that was sort of the end of that, but it was definitely very...
Do you think, was that the first legal accident?
It was the first real lawsuit. I think there were many cease and desists from other various projects before.
Do you think is that part of one of the essays in the book by Amy Adler, who I understand is a lawyer and a professor? She says that you make copyright violation into an art form, and do you think that is part somehow of the work?
So the interesting thing, I think from our perspective, we believe we should be able to, as artists, use the culture and objects that are around us. And I think where the art world, has...
By that extent, Trump is also making great art.
Oh, I mean, he definitely makes art that spreads. I don't know if it's good.
I'll be deported.
Yeah, but no.
It was nice knowing you.
Let's see. I think where the art, where like art history ends with sampling and using materials, very different from where the legal system, even starts with regards to sampling and using objects. And I think every object that we've ever made, I don't think there was ever one that we put out and thought that we were going to get sued. And maybe subtracting one project, every project we put out has been a project that we thought we have complete legal right to do, and it just ended up.
Do you, I mean, I know with Nike was also complicated because obviously their reach was such that it was even harder to find legal counsel because they had so many lawyers that had worked with them and so many clients that. So I'm curious, particularly now that you have a certain status, do you search for clients? I mean, do you need clients for the work to happen? And as a business or as an agency, do you have to have clients, or the clients are your viewers? Or do you think about that?
When you say
do you
clients,
consult for brands? Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the ideas that we're making are concepts that we developed internally. And if it seems like something can be better with the help of a partner, then we'll reach out or ask. But I think generally that's not something.
It's self-produced and self-generated.
Like when we do a collab with Tiffany, Tiffany is not paying us.
Yeah. But do you feel eventually you'll need
Well,
that
that's
type of?
hopefully not.
Is it a desire? Hopefully not.
Yeah. I think that we always pretty much want absolute creative freedom, and being beholden to any kind of client relationship removes that.
Do you? This is a very shallow question. Do you self-describe or identify as artist or as something else?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely would personally, and I think
You would, but you don't.
Well, no. I mean, I would. Let's see. I guess I do, but the question, it's a funny question because I think various people look at the collective in very different ways and would say different. I'm curious, in your opinion, what you might think.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, in general, if I'm questioning whether what you're doing is art, is usually a good sign. No, I mean, it's pretty lame when you already know if it's art.
I also think you're asking that question to us personally, but there's several parts to this. There's a question, is Lukas an artist? Am I an artist? But there's also this question, is the entity MSCHF an artist? Which I would contend that it is, or it is working towards that state. I mean, we are represented by Phaidon Gallery, if anybody from them is here tonight, shout out, which has made this question also, honestly, in some ways even harder to answer because it adds this extra sort of explicitly art world outlet to a practice that was built around trying to exist only on its own terms. I think that it is interesting to consider what it means for MSCHF to be the author of its works, because it is not me, it is not Lukas, it is not any of us, and in fact, it can continue even if we were to cycle out. I think, we
Which
had
would be a really interesting thing.
Yeah. We had a joke early on that, like, Banksy should be a hereditary title in England. Maybe it's like,
Maybe it's already.
maybe it is. You would never know. It could be a Highlander kind of thing. You kill the previous Banksy and then you become Banksy. And MSCHF is trying to be in the way that all corporations, I suppose, are people, it is trying to be an artist personage, or at least an author personage, because I do think that some of the works it makes maybe are deliberately not trying to be art, and others, I think, are.
But do you care more about the reception of your work within an art system, or more by the reception in the crowd, so to speak?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
and I'm sure it's not a definitive answer, but.
Yeah. I would say, one, it depends from project to project, because we have different audiences and different spaces that each project is trying to find its way into. But I mean, to some of what you were saying, Lukas, about sort of the original inspirations for doing this kind of work, part of the goal was to leverage the power of mass culture, to go out and seek those big audiences, which are vast and diverse and weird in ways that often work that's trying specifically to gain the approval of the formalized art world is not.
So should we look at your Sistine Chapel? It's the next project.
Let's see. These are just clicking through some. There we go.
Yeah. Speaking of mass culture, so in between.
Again, this year, what year is this?
2023?
23?
Yeah.
Long story short, because of Jesus and Satan shoes, we accidentally had a practice making sneakers. We made a bunch of sneakers, and it is the closest thing that Mischief has ever had to a sort of normal operating business model. At some point, we made these big red boots. And I think this has been sort of a divisive project, well, externally, but especially within Mischief as well, where the original intent behind these, obviously, is to take the form of an Astro Boy boot, but also sort of more broadly to gesture towards the abstracted cartoon forms of footwear, whether that's Mario or Sonic or any of these kind of like shapes that only exist in abstraction.
Yeah.
And to realize that.
It was really an aesthetic exploration, I think,
Right.
for us. And to be honest, we didn't, internally there was a huge debate about how many of these we should even make. Should we just make very few and it's essentially just an image? We only ended up making 200 initially. And I don't know, just the reception of these was something that we have not experienced, and it lost complete, we lost
How
kind of...
quickly did it grow? Or
Well, let's see. I think we were trying to put it out, at one time, and it leaked about 2 weeks before we were releasing it, or releasing it in an image context. And I think the interesting thing about this is we completely lost control of the narrative of the project, because for us, I think we were trying to elevate this object. This was sort of a cartoon boot. It was something that was sort of lowbrow, and I think we were trying to make an object that we thought could fit in a fashion context in a very elevated way. But then it did sort of end up, because of, people were knocking it off, and there were so many copies of the shoe, to this as its final form, which is kind of just, it became a meme that was completely uncontrolled by us, which is, in hindsight, I think we had a very bad taste in our mouths from it for a while, but in hindsight, it's kind of a beautiful thing. Like a lot of our projects, we put something out into the world, and the performance of how people engage with the objects sort of becomes the narrative that is the story that we tell. And I don't know, I mean, I'm curious, Kevin as well, but at first I had a very bad reaction to where it sort of ended up
to the
aesthetically.
success or to
It was sort of at one point in time, if you saw someone walking down the street with these, you'd be like, damn, that's really cool, let me go talk to them. And then after a while, it was like, if you saw them walking down the street, you'd run to the other side of the street and run the opposite direction as fast as you can.
And by after a while, you mean like 4 days after that first reaction.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, seeing sort of a mass own an object, and you see that in sort of like the Key for All project that we have and some other projects, it is kind of a beautiful thing when collectively everybody owns this image. We don't own it.
Yeah. I mean, it is exactly the kind of dynamic that I think we find interesting about the internet in the first place. And I think it took us a long time to sort of be far enough away from it to see the beauty of that interaction, because at the time we really felt like this thing that we had sort of labored at length to bring into the world completely sort of got collapsed into this.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy because something like this takes a year and a half, 2 years to make, to produce and to design and to engineer, and then it's just gone in a second.
Does he have now a secondary market life? I mean, what is it?
This one, where you can buy a fake on Amazon for $55?
Not a fake, actually a real one. What does it cost now?
Let's see.
$55.
Oh, the real one is still pretty cheap.
No, I mean, I'm being a little glib here, but
Yeah.
it became so wildly over-proliferated, and there are just an uncountable number of replicas to this, which are not at all constructed in the same way, right? Like they are just a flimsy exterior shell made of kind of like the cheapest possible EVA foam.
You're saying you make good shoes.
We do make good shoes, and we make really difficult to construct shoes. But this object, sort of all of the kind of like status desirability to this has been eroded away at this moment in time.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the pendulum swinging back at some point. Who knows? But yeah, I do think so.
Which is cool. I mean,
Yeah.
it's actually,
How
It
long do you
is
think
really
was the
cool. It just
cycle
felt bad in the moment.
of complete depletion from status symbol to
I mean, I think it
Embarrassment
had about 6 weeks of pretty good runway, and then
Does it interest you, in a sense, to resuscitate a product at this point?
I don't
Not
think,
specifically yours, but
Yeah.
another. Does it become interesting to operate a device that would
I think
provide status to objects that are poor or,
I mean, I don't think also, like, as much as we might think that we had, a real knowledge that this would explode or do as well, I don't think we could have predicted it, or at least not predicted it to the extent that it sort of blew up. And I don't know, we do have a practice of putting other objects like this out. This one just happened to be the one that really was the shot on goal that really went in. I mean, I think we take a lot of shots to the point of, putting out drops every 2 weeks, and I think without taking all those shots, you never know. Some of the projects we think might do the best are the projects that do the worst. It's kind of an interesting.
And I mean, you speak about best and worst. What do you think is a project that achieves the most of what you have in mind?
right. I mean, this really does depend on the project very heavily because they are so different from each other. I think that a lot of times people looking at MSCHF, especially people from the marketing and advertising industry, no knock if that's your space, assume that we have some kind of incredible dashboard for impressions and views and likes and retweets and all of this stuff, and that we have kind of like numerical targets that we're chasing, and that's absolutely not the case. I think that some of what we find the most successful are projects that are nowhere near this level of sort of like conventional virality. But they are projects where the core concept of the work ends up being super served by the audience interaction in a way that often we couldn't predict. I almost want to just jump straight to key
Oh, yeah.
here, which will be
Sure.
a little bit.
Several spots. Should
Then
we
maybe
just
we
jump
also-
right through it?
I mean,
and
I
then-
want to look at several spots.
Yeah, we can bounce.
bags,
We can
yeah.
bounce around.
Sorry,
but
you're seeing
just-
all of the slides first.
Yeah, this is the Ludwig method of MSCHF.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Yeah. So this is a project where we have this car that has an RFID key, and we have 5,000 keys, all of which can unlock this car and will allow you to drive it. And no matter where you park it, there are 4,999 other people who could walk by, hop in, and drive it off somewhere else.
And the keys were sold or distributed?
They were sold on this website. They were $19.
19.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we were very happy is someone bought one in every state, including Alaska and Hawaii, even though those two states were definitely not getting this car. Thank you. But it at least meant that there was a large enough distribution of people with this key all over the United States.
Right. So there was nowhere this could go where there wasn't another driver really who could find it. And so in some sense, it's kind of like it is a Grand Theft Auto simulator, and it is also a tiny little traveling commons, which could have been the subject of Tragedy of the Commons. But in the case of this car, and kind of why we really returned to it, and why I wanted to bring it up, is this idea of kind of like a concept that lived a life that was above and beyond sort of our first expectation. We parked this thing under the BQE when it launched, and we had made our peace with the idea that 48 hours later it could be in a ditch in the side of the highway, right? But instead, it had this incredible life where it was on the road for 9 months, and it was driven by who knows how many hundreds or thousands of people. And it became the focus of a community of people who were alternately trying to steal it, liberate it, break it, fix it, kind of all manners of engagement. You know, it became sort of like, you want to talk about something that became an elevated status symbol.
Yeah.
This kind of thing we saw relatively frequently with the Porsche, where there were sort of these meetings of equals of people who would want to trade the car. And this thing's a 2005 PT Cruiser, like the kind of person who's rolling up in their Porsche in order to drive this absolute shitbox.
It's beautiful.
It is
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's
It's
a
lovely.
beautiful car.
How did you know where it was? If you had the key?
If you had a key, there was a phone number that you could call to get the GPS coordinates of it. The community actually built a website to track it, so you literally could just pull up, I think it might
For
be
how long did it continue?
this map. It was about 9 months before it was...
Do you know how many people wrote it?
No clue, but I mean, hundreds.
Hundreds, for
yeah,
sure, yeah. It was this, I think early on, is this?
This is how people would hand it off. For a while, they would, take a photo like this and then say, "All right, you're next."
There was a sense where, because everybody who had this was like heavily posting to TikTok, you could kind of watch this project like a television show.
Yeah.
And we would see people, chasing it down I-95, waiting for the driver to have to use the bathroom, and then like hop out and take the car. Early on, there was do we have it in here, the NFT guys?
I mean, you can see.
Yeah. So this was in Philly, and there was this group of guys who got this car and flagged a cop down and told him that someone had planted a tracker on their car and was following
to
them.
free it and keep it.
Yeah,
To try to get him to disable our GPS.
We did have a few dummy GPSs in there that they did take out. And actually, for a while it was in Philly, it was in a garage that didn't let our GPS things transmit the location. So that people were like in uproar about
Right.
And so where did he end its journey? Do you know?
It ended in
the
Truckee,
west.
California.
Yeah.
And nobody pushed it into a river or a canal, which would be my first idea, of course, like what people do with bikes in
I mean,
in
people
Berlin.
definitely use it like a public bathroom. But I think...
Oh, really?
I think the interesting thing was that there was a community of people that raised money to keep it on the road. There was a GoFundMe where you could put money and if someone was near the car, they would grab it and then bring it to a shop, pay some money to fix it up and then put it back on the road. It was kind of a very beautiful battle between people that were just really looking to destroy the free car that they had possession of.
Did you have any way of knowing who held on to it the longest, or?
No.
We have no kind of audience tracking
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because people would sort of fix it according to what
Skill
they
sets,
knew
yeah.
how to do with a car. So like, at some point, somebody jumped on the sunroof and like crashed it in, and someone fixed it by like bolting a piece of sheet steel over the top of the car.
I believe this guy is the one that's cutting.
Yeah, he's cutting it.
the
Yeah,
sheet
yeah,
seal out and putting it on the
Which
car.
was, it didn't have a hole in the roof anymore, but when you drove, you had wind whistling under the front edge of the sheet steel, blowing all your stuff around. There were like 12 people in a month who changed the oil on this. And I think it's like people who were taught how to change oil by a parent and maybe never had a car to do it on. So they got this and they were like,
Oh, I can do my part.
I'm going to maintain this,
Yeah.
What year was this?
2022?
2022?
This is completely blasphemous of me even to bring it up, but Joseph Beuys, the German artist who actually spoke at the New School in the 70s, famously spoke about social sculpture, for this type of participatory. It's actually quite unclear what he meant by social sculpture, if not just the act of living together in a sense. And I think this becomes a strange social sculptural object, with then the participation also of its media, or did it manifest itself in the media, the sculpture, aside from the tools to track it down? Were there stories
I mean, there were
about it, aside from Instagram? I mean,
yeah, there were
television or
definitely
newspapers or-
articles and things written about it, but I don't know. To be honest, it was the people that were engaging with
Right,
it that were watching the narrative, and
I mean,
there were
it's-
communities that built up around it to just figure out where it was and share it. And I think that was the biggest narrative.
Right.
Do you want to skip maybe to several spots?
Yeah,
I was going
yeah.
to say, and I'm probably misreading this, but obviously your work is very much of this moment or this past few years in its integration, particularly of media and social media and real life, or the tension between the two. But I also find it strangely melancholic in the way in which it's also connected to COVID in a weird way, and particularly this piece. There is so much life online in your work that makes it a little desperate in my mind, or a little sad because it speaks of isolation, it speaks of, and this piece, which you started really at the beginning,
Right,
the
right,
lockdown,
right.
Yeah.
in a sense manifest both, the kind of collective communal aspect of your work, but also the solitude of life behind the screen.
Yeah, that's an interesting read.
Yeah.
I'm always
Let's see. I mean, so
depressing.
yeah. This was a project that we did right at the beginning of COVID, and I think it was also at a time where we had a whole bunch of projects and objects queued up that we then could not do because of lockdown. And so a lockdown project was we bought a Damien Hirst spot painting and
A print,
a print. Yes.
which is more endearing. Because
Yeah. A little bit safer, and
Budget.
offered it up as individual spots to be purchased for $480, and then offered the skeleton as well at auction. So essentially anybody could own a real physical Damien Hirst piece. And this is us
And he
cutting it up.
didn't interfere, or do you know if he knows about it?
We have no confirmation that he knows about it. I imagine he probably does, but
He's probably
he's
upset
definitely
he
never said
didn't do it
anything.
himself. But
I mean,
Well, so funny you should say that, because the financial dynamics of this piece are actually part of why it is, I think, resonant for us, and also speaks to some of this idea of like deliberately trying to deny the typical workings of the art world. We did buy this thing at the start of COVID, so this was like right when restaurants were first figuring out how to get food to people, and so there was the model of you have the food, you put it in the bag, you kind of like leave it on the sidewalk outside of the restaurant, and then your person swings by and picks it up, contactless. And so the gallery that we purchased from did that for this piece. We were like, we want this print, and they were like, great, you can't come in, but what we'll do is we'll box it up and we'll put it on the sidewalk, and you can drive by and pick it up. And then it'll have been sort of like this zero contact experience. But then the other thing that they said as we were purchasing this was, well, actually they said two things. First, they said, this is a great investment. This is probably going to double in value in 5 years. And the second thing they said was, are you sure you don't want us to ship it to someone in Connecticut, because you can dodge a bunch of taxes by doing that? But we, on hearing that part about this as an investment, we're sort of going, we really hope that, in fact, we're going to double the value of this thing in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because the aggregate value of these individual spots is about twice as much as the original piece was worth. And in fact, when the spots sold out, we called the gallery to try to sell them back a spot to see if they would want to carry our piece now.
did they? Or?
no,
And they did
no,
not.
I don't think they responded.
It's interesting that you read this as sort of a comment on isolation, which I really haven't
I
thought
don't know
of.
if it's a comment, but it does reflect
or
a
a-
moment. Well, I think many of your work reflect a moment in which life is experienced vicariously and behind the screen, and also the fact that even the gallery display or the art fair, they're all typical behaviors of these times,
Right.
and as such they manifest connectivity and solitude as the recto and
yeah,
verso
yeah,
of our lives. And
I mean, we were.
And because of when this happened and because of, the fact that you take a whole and you sell it as part, the idea of fractional ownership that on one hand, yes, can be, constructed with a kind of Robin Hood mentality of the many, the sort of GameStop mentality, but it's also a very depressing notion that nobody can really own anything in totality because it's so expensive that you can only own a fraction.
Fractionalized ownership was very hot around this
Yeah.
time, right? And people were building a rally road for fractionalized ownership of cars, and there was the several art world equivalents for that for paintings. And I do think we were very much poking fun at that model, and I think maybe the only thing sort of more sad than owning a tiny piece of something because you have to have it individually while you're locked in your house is believing that you own something as an artwork when in fact you have a 0.01% interest in it as an investment vehicle and it's in a free port 100 miles away from you.
You can't invite people over to see your 1%
You sure
of a
can,
world.
You sure can. I mean, it is such a blatant acknowledgement of just the financialization of these objects, that kind of fractionalized ownership. And I do think that this is almost despite cutting up the work, it's almost a more appreciative model of fractionalized
Have you tried to bring them together? Have you had a convention where the owners come? And
I mean, I think we did dream of someone buying all of them and then taping it all back up. But we have displayed them in this sort of setting before. But this was it. This is the second time we did this at Phaidon, where all the spots were displayed behind the piece that was cut out, which, to be honest, was a very different experience. I think these were sold for a lot more. They were sold in a real gallery space as opposed to just on a website. I think the engagement and interaction was very different. I think seeing them was very nice like this, but I think owning the first set for me was much more interesting.
I want to maybe quickly look at two of the last projects and then take questions from the audience. I don't know if you want to skip to...
Either one of them that you...
or we can do both.
Okay.
No? If you, we can do the ATM since we're talking about the financialization.
We're talking about money. Yeah.
Or do you want to do the bag? Or
I mean, we could jump into the ATM.
Yeah.
Sure.
So actually, we still have three, but let's try and do two.
Okay. All right, so this was a project called ATM Leaderboard. It was a ATM that when you used it, it took your bank balance, took a photo of you, and put you up on a leaderboard with everybody else that had ever used this ATM. This was a project we wanted to do for a very long time and had a very specific idea of trying to place it at Art Basel, which seemed like a perfect spot where people kind of
Art
wanted
Basel,
to.
Miami, right?
Yeah. Specifically Miami. Those are the things. It ended up being a thing where, like, we conceived this, and before we even were engaged with Phaidon, for example, we tried to put this in Art Basel, and we, called up the people at Art Basel, and we were like, we have this great idea, can we just put this here? And they were completely confused as to who we are, and they were like, no, you really need to be part of a gallery to put anything in here. So that sort of actually brought us, I think, on that art journey, this initial concept piece. But while it was there, it had, kind of a life of its own. People just using it accidentally. These are photos from within the ATM looking at the people as they're looking at their bank balance put up and ranked. It would play these very interesting videos depending on where you ranked. This is sort of how it looked in the convention center. And there were a few prominent people that came by and used it that sort of ended up making it blow up a little bit. At one point, let's see, do we have some photos? Diplo came by and used it, and he had the highest score for a while, which was very funny. And then we saw some very sad sights of other people trying to show that they had more money in their debit account than Diplo, which, I don't know, felt very, odd and icky, to be honest. I don't know. I think this was the couple that.
This is the high score.
Yeah. And
When it's a joint account.
maybe, yeah.
So actually, I mean, just to kind of like, they're in fact both number 1 and number 2 on the leaderboard. Where did we end up? 9 million? But they showed up the
very
first
smart
time.
also to have 9 million in a checking account.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like-
yeah. I think they showed up at first and they had like 100, like, I think they're on here 3 times. And they,
Yeah, you're right, actually.
they first did it, they realized how it worked, they then put 5 million in the bank account, and then I believe the woman didn't appear to like the photo.
Didn't like the photo.
So then he went and transferred more money into it, and then he took the second photo. And then they were happy, and they left, yeah. I have to say, there was a noticeable hush in the audience when people put their debit card in and they had sort of more normal debit card balances. I think people were very encouraged by like the financial transparency that people were, showing. And then when people were flaunting their stuff, it was a very different situation.
Did anybody follow them and rob them? Or
Oh my gosh! Actually, I mean, it was interesting because people were trying to peg who were the people that had the money because they could sell very expensive art to them. I mean, there was one woman that was going around, and I swear she was. I mean, I wasn't there for this, but maybe you were the one.
I don't think she was trying to sell them art.
She wasn't trying to sell them art. She was just trying to find people that were very wealthy. And she would drag a guy over, ask them to do this, see their debit account. If it wasn't so high, she would go and try to pull another person over. And I believe she tried to pull, like Jared
Yeah, she
Leto.
grabbed Jared Leto and he freaked out. She got ejected from the fair.
Yeah.
do you want to take questions now? Or you want to look at the
How much time do we have?
we still, let's take questions and maybe we look at the 2 other projects in answering the questions.
Cool.
I think we still
Something
have
comes.
15, 20 minutes. So, who's next?
I think the idea is if you'd like to ask a question, just come on down and line up on both sides, and we'll try to get through as many as possible.
Cool.
Yikes, okay.
Thank you. What's up, y'all? How's it going? I got a question about the PT Cruiser. Did y'all just end up with like a huge stack of Easy Pass bills? Like, how did that end up happening?
We
People just
actually
ended up
we got the bills and we paid them. So we
Nice.
did end up with a stack of bills.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted some closure on that, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I think we only got 2 actual like traffic violations, if I remember correctly.
Hey, my question is like, so I think you guys do a really good job of like finding the harmony of like art and commerce, and pertaining to like the earlier part of the conversation around how you guys like look at yourself as a business and stuff like that. I know, like for example, early on you guys raised like venture capital and stuff, and I'm sure there's like a lot of pressure that came with that. So I'm curious how you guys sort of like work with the pressure with your many releases, with your many drops, of like maintaining this sort of like quote unquote pure art versus the more, like you said, like some of the drops are very much just like, all right, we're just dropping a thing and like hoping it sells out.
Yeah, let's see. So, okay, I guess, so to the first part of this, early on there was this deliberate decision that we basically wanted to maximize our own creative power. And we decided that operating as a business and taking advantage of any of those tools that are typically used for non-artistic commercial endeavors was the strategy that we were going to try. I think that we have in fact been very fortunate in that we have really never made work in reaction to investor pressure. And part of that is because MSCHF is a very weird, particular company that does not look like a fantastic financial bet in a traditional sense. So you do not come to MSCHF as an investor because you have a clear idea necessarily even of what it does or how it is going to make any kind of return, but because it is interesting and because it does not have a lot of comparables, and sometimes it's, I don't know, I don't invest in companies in large sums of money on a regular basis, but I believe that it is sometimes fruitful to take a gamble on something by virtue of the fact that it doesn't look like anything else available to you. And I think that we have managed to skate by pretty much on continuing to be that thing. So we are not really reacting to that kind of pressure when we're releasing things. We do obviously have, we release things that are products, right? Like at the end of the day, the actual business model is we make and sell product. But the rubric that I think we've employed throughout MSCHF's existence that has been very, very good to adhere to rigorously is that you always have to know whether the thing that you're making in any moment is gonna make you money, it's gonna basically break even, or it's gonna lose you money. And you never try to hedge in between those categories. You know what it is, you commit to it. And if it's something that's gonna break even, you don't try to scrape a little bit of profit onto it. And if it's something that's gonna lose money, that's fine. Just make sure you know that you're aware of that, and then it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think you laid it out quite well. I mean, MSCHF is operating as a business, as like that is the author entity. It is this business, and there are business, issues over time. I feel like every year, I'm like, are we going to exist next year because of either some project that we did that got us in trouble or something else? But I think that's just sort of those are the pressures that I think we feel. But I think we've realized.
I think are pressures that basically any business and probably any artist to some degree also.
Yeah. I think we've really tried to just keep the creative as sacred as possible and as separate from that as possible. But yeah. Cool.
Hello, thank you guys so much for coming. My question is, given that a lot of the things or the drops that you guys have don't really have any comparable thing on the market, you really don't know how the audience is going to react, or the general public is going to react to anything that you drop. How do you distinguish between a good and a bad idea? How do you guys end up filtering the ideas that you guys have on the drawing board table?
Yeah, I mean, very good question. I think, well, first, we'll come up with thousands and thousands of ideas, and we have lists of these ideas that we, keep. And honestly, the good ones stay around in our minds for a long time. I think one thing that we've learned putting out a lot of work is we don't want to make work that's immediately reactive, something that's like, oh, I saw something on my timeline today that's dealing with this subject matter, I should make a project about it right now, because by the time you end up making that project, it's completely irrelevant. And I think for us, an idea has to have a bit more of a lifespan, possibly. So I think if we think it will be relevant for a year or two, I think we feel confident that we could put it out. But there are other projects. We've had some projects that I've thought are amazing ideas, and the window for that project has just passed. And unfortunately, we just didn't make it in that window, so it'll never see the light of day. And yeah, it's hard to pick what is a good idea and what is a bad idea. And I think, honestly, we argue back and forth all the time about what is a good project and what is a bad project. I think we have, over the course of making so much work, found what our projects are, and I think have a pretty good gut sensibility internally about what are things we want to pursue.
Yeah. I think that last is kind of worth reiterating. I don't know how you determine whether any idea is good or bad, but there is a sense that we have of what is a MSCHF project, and it's come out of 5 years of conversation with the people that we make work with.
Thank you guys so much.
It's a little
Hey,
bit like
so-
being in church with the line.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Hey, so one of my favorite Mischief projects is the sink at the Met. And I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit more about how that came to be and if that still exists, because I assume they probably obviously know at this point that that's there.
Yeah. Also one of our, I don't know, our favorite projects. So this was a project where we, piece by piece, stole all the plumbing from a sink in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and put parts there. So they still had a functional sink, but we had their sink. And as soon as we did tell them about it, I know I saw a few videos or images of people going to the Met and trying to find the bathroom with the sink, which is very impressive because there are a lot of bathrooms in the Met, and to actually find it is exciting. And I think maybe a month afterwards, I went back to see if it was there, and they had taken it away. So I don't know. I don't know what they really think of it. I do think that's probably the one project that I know for a fact was actually illegal from the start. I think when I said before, like, oh yeah, everything we do, we think we have the legal right to do it, that was the one where I knew 100% beforehand that it was not okay to do, but yeah. No,
Our fondest wish is that the Met will acquire that piece, even if all they do is just take the pipes off it and reinstall them onto their bathroom.
you know, famously, Duchamp said the greatest products, the greatest artworks of America are the plumbings and the bridges.
amazing. Yeah.
Howdy, big fan. What do you guys make of like the next iteration of tech being kind of almost chaotic and, you know, unpredictable in some ways? And then I guess, what do you think of, this is a more specific question, like permissionless systems like blockchain, given that you work in commerce and finance, and someone that works in blockchain and worked for a large coin at one point finds it to be almost ludicrous what exists in the marketplace. Just love to understand what you guys are doing or if thoughts about that, because I think it's so exploitable and like so silly in many ways. Not like meme coins like Trump and all that, like the real companies that exist that raise 20 million, 50 million for nothing.
Yeah.
The next generation of tech being so chaotic. All right, so
Yeah, like
talking about
AI,
AI.
furthering quantum computing, how kind of it all falls apart, in my opinion, from high levels of acceleration and almost ad nauseum how much is coming our way.
Sure.
Let's see. I mean, good question.
Yeah, let's see. I guess. Okay, let's start with the sort of crypto blockchain stuff, because I think that's a little bit more historical, and it's something that we have pretty deliberately never used. I think that we are. So obviously, Mischief is very interested in places where the economics get silly, and that's one of them. And we are interested in the social dynamics of that, but maybe not like the technologies. And part of that is because in the same way that we think about, honestly, in the same way that we think about the art world as sort of being like a restrictive constraint for audience, so is crypto stuff. There's a just very significant barrier to entry to use it. Which is always getting lower, but relative to a general population. So we have done work that is certainly in some way inspired by the cultural conversations that are happening because of all of that. I mean, even stuff like, very simple, but like our Tontine project, where we just have this website that it's got a bunch of users who have to log into it every day, or we assume them to be dead, and the last one alive is getting paid out. There are a lot of projects that we have done that would have been good fits to build using cryptocurrency instead of real US dollars, because honestly, the logistics of paying people out for any of our like
It's hell,
weird
yeah.
money pool projects are super annoying. But it hamstrings their reach, and it adds this like inescapable layer of concept onto everything that we are generally trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Which is, so I guess this is just a long-winded way of saying, like, yeah, all of those cultural conversations are super interesting to us, where we're just not the people who get geeked out about the underlying technology.
I think also in that space, there's just, like, we never want to do harm to any of the people that we're making work for, and I think there's certain times where, like, if we just don't want to make a project that, like, to actually make a project in that space, I think we just have to put our heads down in it a lot more. I do think it's very possible. It is where there's some very silly, interesting economies and other things that I think would be very fun to play with materially, but we just haven't jumped in.
Cool. Thanks, y'all.
I have two questions. One, whose blood did you put in the shoe, and how did you obtain that? Did you hire a phlebotomist to come and obtain? And did you mix your blood together?
Yeah, we mixed our blood together. It's a little bit of blood from a lot of people, and then a lot of blood from a couple of people who accidentally cut themselves while we were doing the work.
Cool. Amazing. I also think that it makes sense that that project really blew up in your face because you, like, it's very, a lot of what I see MSCHF doing is witchcraft, and that, you know, that's a big deal to be sending your blood out like that. So for you to get sued by Nike makes sense.
Damn.
And then my other question is, so from my understanding, you guys have like 25 employees, and from what I understand, like 5 or 6 of them are women. So are you gonna care that we're gonna hate you soon for that?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do about it?
I think we're always just looking to work with as best people as possible.
How do you find the best people?
A lot of talking to as many interesting people as possible. But that is something actively that we're thinking about a lot. So, we did start as a group of just 5 friends. We're all guys at the beginning, so it is something that.
No, I love MSCHF as an entity. I think seeing it grow is very special, and I am curious to see what will happen when you add more women into this witchcraft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Us too.
Yeah.
We are not taking. Were you trying to say, Daniel? No more questions?
Maybe just one last question.
Okay, big response. Why don't you ask all the questions to the people waiting, and you ask them all? Yeah. And you'll do the same.
Yeah.
So you just.
I got 2 questions. From this guy, crazy idea that you'll never make?
What was it?
What is
Just
that?
ask all
What
the
is a
questions.
crazy idea that you'll never make?
Ooh.
Okay, we really want to pre-sell a celebrity's skull before they die.
What?
We've been trying to get somebody to do this for years. It's literally like 4 or 5 years of trying to pitch this to people, and the moment we pitch it, we never hear from them again. So that's.
The next question was, will you ever start a book club?
That's a good idea. That's
cool.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
And then my question was, I think it's really interesting how you guys are drivers of, but also products of today's attention economy. I'm wondering if you could imagine MSCHF existing outside of today's social media landscape, and if so, like, how would that be?
Yeah, interesting. I do think the social media landscape is, like, we exist in that. And the funny thing is we try to make our work completely without thinking about that space very frequently. I think even to begin with, when we started on Venmo. We would make a website because you could send a link on Venmo to people and they would just magically get this 1 cent notification that they were paid 1 cent and here's a website link, and they were confused, and that was how we started spreading projects because we didn't want to be on Instagram, but then we were, kicked off Venmo, and then we were like, okay, what's the next best thing? So then we had everybody's phone numbers from Venmo, so we started texting them, and then we did something that was sort of like illegal from a campaign finance standpoint, and T-Mobile and AT&T kicked us off from texting people, so we couldn't text people anymore. So then we scrambled and made an app, and then Apple, like stopped us from updating that app after a period of time, and then we realized that people were impersonating us on Instagram. So then we kind of ended up there, but we tried very hard to avoid it as much as possible, just because we didn't want to be caught up in the rat race of you make a project for this square or this space or this video. Like all the projects, I think, speak better outside of that environment, despite the fact that everybody that's reacting or engaging with them is existing there, because that's where we all exist online.
But I do think there's something interesting here, which is that the strategies for making work online have to change as the environment around them changes, and that environment has changed dramatically even in the time that we've been working together. Which, granted, okay, Lukas and I have worked together for like 10 years, so it's a little bit of a longer timeline, but when we first arrived at this idea that we wanted to figure out the mechanics of the spread of ideas within culture, it was this incredibly, it was a much more, I guess, press-dominated ecosystem, and there were sort of like select channels that you could insert into, and then you'd percolate to all of these audiences in a way that, even over that time span, has completely gone away. And I think that this is like a continual negotiation that we're involved in, not necessarily because like we're sitting down and trying to be a media strategy team, but just because we all live inside of this environment and we are looking for how it works at any given moment. And so I do think that like as much as we have tried to reject social media, and I think gained power from rejecting making work for social media. Like we've been so adamant that we are always trying to make things that cannot be effectively represented in a little square of photo or video. We're unconsciously reacting to all of that. And we will continue to. Like, right, we are completely shaped by that, and we are trying to deny whatever it is at any given time.
I think the very last question, and because we have to leave the theater, and I should say shamelessly that the book is for sale outside. If you want to be so kind to then maybe go outside, maybe people can ask you questions individually, but.
Thank you.
Sorry.
One question for me, one for someone behind me. The first was on your note on distribution networks, and I thought that quote about Coca-Cola was really interesting. I was wondering, did you guys study anything around that when you guys first started that was really interesting? And secondly, like, you have this balance between creating and virality and creating just to create. Like, how do you balance that tension with how you distribute and how you make things?
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Did we? I guess it's not like we ever formally studied anything in that.
Yeah. It really was like looking and trying to emulate other.
Yeah. I think so. Something that I think is, I'm still kind of like also got the other question bouncing around in my head, but like back in whenever it was 2011 or whatever, there was this essay that Brad Trammell wrote, which was called Athletic Aesthetics, and it was really like. At that time, basically, it was like, oh, painters should put their work on Instagram, which was semi-novel, but it had this notion that I think really stuck with us, which was kind of like, I think of it almost like speed matching when you're merging on the highway, like you're existing within some flow of content, and you want to try to operate at that speed, which for him was social media. It was images. Where do images live these days? They live on Instagram, you know? For us, the things that we are making are products, they are apps, they are video games, and so what we are speed matching with is not the pace of social media, but it's still pretty fast. And I think that was honestly one of the drivers towards the entire model that we started with, was sort of like an adaptation of this idea of athleticism to sort of like a completely heterogeneous output.
I also think because the objects and projects are all so space specific, I think different spaces have different distribution networks. So if you want to talk to a bunch of lawyers, it's maybe good to be in certain publications, or if you want to talk to a bunch of people about footwear, there are certain spaces and places where those exist, and it's just sort of understanding how to get into those spaces with the project that I think is always part of designing the work. Like, I think it's important when you're making something to try to figure out where it will live in the world. And if you just want to make it for yourself, that's also great, and it's hard to make things, and I always applaud anybody making anything. But if you want to make things to spread, just understanding where you want that to live will help you figure out how to position that work.
Yeah, and then actually on that note, the one behind me was about the red boots and the leak and how you transitioned that with your work with Crocs and the yellow boot. I want to make sure I'm representing that right, yeah? How did that impact that next decision?
Actually, the funny thing about the Crocs thing was we had been talking to them and shared them the red boot, and they liked it. They wanted to do it before the project released, so that was already in the works beforehand. I think they had a stipulation maybe in the contract that said that they could abandon the project if, for whatever reason, we had some legal issues for the red boots. But that was already in the works pre Big Red Boot release. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. So we
Thank you.
take it outside.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.